Hello, welcome back to Socially Sound. I'm Sarah.
I'm Kirsty.
Today we brought someone on.
Hello, I'm Kate, and this is my sign name. I'm a deaf researcher working at the Deafness, Cognition and Language Research Centre. I do a lot of research linked to deaf children and their language development, linked to sign language and literacy.
Perfect. So we brought you on because we received a submission from a hearing parent who goes to a playgroup with their deaf child, but the other parents are deaf with hearing children. So the question is, well, the parents are worried because at home the primary language is BSL, so there's concerns surrounding speech development. So the question then is, how can they develop their language through speech and BSL? The age range is 11 months to 3 years, so they are still very young, but they're still worried about when their children start school. Will they develop their speech alongside their current use of sign language, despite their parents not being oral and just BSL users? That's the worry. They're wondering if there's any tips because there's a lot of research about deaf children's language development, but not much for hearing children with deaf parents. Does that make sense? We're therefore asking for your opinions and whether there is research surrounding this.
And it would also be good to have a discussion around bilingualism and your experience as a deaf parent raising both a deaf child and a hearing child.
Yeah, obviously we're just 22, 23 with no kids, so we don't know how to answer this submission and not asking you instead as the expert.
This topic comes up often in the deaf community. A lot of deaf parents, really, most deaf parents have hearing children, and they often ask if they should sign with their hearing child because they need to go to school and out into the hearing world. So, deaf parents become worried that if they do sign with them, their hearing child will be behind their peers or that their hearing child won't develop spoken language. But really, we have to remember the world is full of hearing people. Hearing children with deaf parents likely only use or see BSL when they are with parents or around the local deaf community, maybe peers too, family members or family friends who use BSL, but the world is full of hearing people and spoken language. Young children from birth will pick up spoken language from the TV when they go to the shops, out in public, on the train. They will pick up conversations and therefore exposed to spoken language in those interactions. Also, most parents will put their children into nursery, where again spoken language is the dominant model used in mainstream nursery settings. This means the child will get the best of both. Access to BSL at home, access to sound and spoken language in the wider world. The best of both.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, same. Also, it really does depend on their age. So children from age, like you said, in nursery, how old are children then? Usually, some start as a baby from 6 months to 9 months. So while parents are working, they have childcare, and then that usually ends at 4 years. Then they will go to reception at 4 years old. Yeah, so it does depend if a child goes to nursery or not. Naturally, they will pick up speech in that hearing environment. Yes, also they have research in America, which looked into CODA's children of deaf adults, comparing hearing children with deaf parents and deaf children with deaf parents. This looked at their language acquisition. The aim of this research was to show that deaf children with cochlear implants with deaf parents can be bilingual using both spoken and sign language, showing that sign language doesn't prevent deaf children from learning spoken language. And that is a general misconception that if a child uses sign language, they can't hear or speak, which is not true. Anyway, that research compared both groups who have deaf parents, one group being deaf with cochlear implants and the other group hearing coders. It was found that their language and speech development developed at the same level. Not just that, but they also develop language and speech at the same rate as hearing families with hearing children. There was no differences in their language development. So in my opinion, that was fantastic research.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have to look more into that.
I need to read that research. And another interesting fact, some of that research is now showing that deaf children with deaf cochlear implants with deaf parents do better in comparison to their deaf peers with cochlear implants with hearing parents.
Oh.
Because they have access to sign language from birth. Which means they have developed an understanding of signs linked to various concepts.
Yes.
For example, they will know the sign for mummy, daddy, drink, food, and so on. Therefore, when they have their implants switched on and they hear the word drink or mummy, they can associate the meaning through sign language. Which, compared to children that don't have a wide range of vocabulary, it can be difficult for them to understand what they're hearing.
That's so cool.
That's interesting to see the difference between hearing parents with a deaf child with cochlear implants when compared to deaf parents with a deaf child with cochlear implants, and they do better.
Yeah. Because it's bilingualism, they have both sign and speech at the same time.
I think it's really important to remember that, yes, whilst that research is amazing, for those groups of children, there are so many factors that can have an impact on language development. Not all deaf children in deaf families develop good language skills. Not all hearing children in hearing families develop good language skills. We need to remember it also relies on how much parents interact with their children. Really, it's called parent-to-child interaction. So parents, whether they are deaf or hearing parents with deaf children, if they truly put the effort in to bond and interact with their deaf and or hearing child, that could be reading books, telling them about the world, those children will thrive and do well. In comparison to children who have little interactions with their family, it's really important that they are engaging with their children. That's a good point. That means even if language and communication is there, engaging with your child is still important. That's interesting. So going back to your question about deaf parents being worried over their hearing child, really, deaf parents, if they feel comfortable using sign language or they want to sign, then do use sign language with your child. But if they feel they would prefer to use speech, that's up to them. Really, it's a language choice. If they do want to sign, they shouldn't worry, because signing will give them access to language. And they will have that language to access and learn other languages.
True.
For example, do you remember your tweet about different spoken languages and how you can pick up the spoken words because you know the sign language from the country that uses that spoken language?
Yeah, so I recently came back from France and I stayed with a deaf person who knows spoken French and uses LSF, French Sign Language. I had already learnt French at a GCSE, so I do remember basic words. So she was teaching me LSF. So I learnt the signs first and sir. I already knew those French words, so it was easy for me to take in those signs because I had access to the language. In addition to that, I would learn an international sign as well. So I was quickly realising that each sign made sense because I would then be told the English word, French word, or even the Swedish word, then being able to make those links. While growing up, I always thought I wouldn't be able to learn other spoken languages because I can't hear. But now that I've learnt basic words in different sign languages, I'm like, oh, I can just connect that with the actual spoken word. So I don't know why I never made that connection before. Like, I can just use my access to sign language to understand spoken language.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that sign language is too different to spoken language, which they think that it means you can't make links, and if you sign, you can't learn speech or read and write. But really, that's not true. There's something called cross-linguistic transfer. So the better language skills you have in one language, it will help us to learn other languages. So that's called cross-linguistic transfer. So it's like Sarah said, you understood some French words like brother and sister, and you picked up those signs, and you picked those up quickly. Funnily enough, I didn't know the signs, but I picked it up when you showed me just now. I just learned that now, and I already knew the French words. So that is an example of having vocabulary which helped me to pick that up quicker. It's the same for sign language. I think people need to think of it like this. Saying, will sign language impact their ability to learn to speak? It's the same as saying, will learning French impact them learning English? It won't. They will know English already. But the first question, they only say that because there's a negative perception around sign language.
That's true. No one's ready to hear it, but that's true. Very true. Very true.
Like, just imagine people saying, don't speak Spanish to children because it'll stop them from speaking French. Nobody ever says that.
True.
There's a way people view sign language like it's treated like it's not a language in a way. If you know what I mean, like they view it as a commodity, something to use for fun. Like, no, people use this to access things, information, services, and money more. So this is really interesting to talk about.
Yes. So really, the deaf parents have nothing to worry about in regards to their hearing children having access to speech, because their access to BSL will support their English.
As long as they have support in other areas too, home life, school, and so on. Yeah. I think if you're imagining sign language in isolation or part of another world and not seen before, then it may be difficult. But again, that's not true. We always have access to the wider world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So watching TV, music,
even on the phone, TikTok.
Yeah, so essentially having that access to sounds will help their speech development. The submission did also discuss that one of the mums plays bedtime songs, but isn't confident that it is enough to aid the child's speech development. But if the child is hearing those songs, surely they're remembering the songs well enough to speak/sing along, even signing along. So really, there shouldn't be a breakdown in communication, right? So therefore, as long as the child is exposed to sound and speech, theoretically they'll be fine.
Well, a lot of the feedback I've gotten from deaf parents with hearing children, when their children go to school and learn different subjects, they tend to perform better than their peers. That is because they are already bilingual. Being bilingual really helps the brain to retain and learn more information. That's interesting. When I studied education at university, there was research and discussion on how if a child has access to either 2 or more signed spoken languages, they perform well in their education compared to their peers. I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of research that shows being bilingual provides cognitive benefit. And that applies for knowing both a sign language and a spoken language.
So I feel like the problem here is people aren't considering sign language as the first language. They view English to be the first language, therefore worrying that it won't be developed. But there is a language there. The sign language already exists as the first, and English will be second. Therefore, it's bilingualism. I think that's what the problem is, the disconnects. The parents aren't thinking, wait, my child already had a language that will help them to learn another one. And there is already research that proves babies being exposed to multiple language pick them up quicker, therefore performing better than peers who only know 1 or 2 languages. So why aren't we encouraging kids to be exposed to 2 languages at the same time?
Also, we need to remember that Britain is a very diverse country. So many people and families have languages that they use at home. There are people from Eastern Europe, India, and so on. They speak their language at home and their children grow up around that spoken language. When they go to school, many might not know English. They will become behind their peers because they don't know the spoken language that is being used at school. But they will quickly catch up because they have already made associations with words and concepts. And that is really key here, yes. Yeah, so I think really in conclusion for this submission, yes, it's important to know that they can access both signed and spoken language, but it's equally important to remember sign language is a language. For the spoken language, it can develop later on, but to worry about it this early on, please don't. I mean, 11 months to 3 years old, there is still time to develop spoken language.
Yeah.
I think parents should be more focused on how they interact and how much they explain the world around them. Along with socialisation, making sure that the child is around and has peers the same age as them. As well as making sure that they can communicate with their peers. Often deaf children have peers that they can't communicate with. If they can't communicate with their peers, they don't have access to the language, and the language environment needs to be accessible. Usually for hearing children, they have the privilege of being able to access both spoken and sign language. So for deaf children, their access needs need to be considered. Early literacy is important too, like reading books. For example, if there's a picture of a ball, show the word and also the sign. That way the child can recognise the words and the signs associated with it. Also teaching the alphabet too. This gives them access to understanding that English is different to BSL, which is important for them to know. So if parents do all of the above, that's great.
I'm taking notes for my children, remembering what to do with them.
We have to remember it's not a perfect world. I think families should focus on those things that I mentioned before and not worry too much about how you relay language. There's a lot of worry around, should I use BSL, SSE, spoken language, and over what language they should use. The answer to that is, if you're comfortable with the language and the communication works, then do that. Don't let anyone tell you that what you're doing is wrong. How you use language is entirely up to you.
That's true. I'm viewing it from a perspective of trial and error. Like, whatever is done at first may not be the right fit and you notice it not working. You can always change it up and try other methods.
You're right, absolutely.
You don't have to be the same as other parents and copy their ways. Every child is different. We need to remember that there is individuality, so whatever works for one won't necessarily work for another. So I think work out what works for the child specifically and then go from there. The child can thrive that way.
Yes. Yeah, as long as they have the foundations, they will thrive. Absolutely, you're right. It is trial and error. All children are different, but at the same time, don't leave it too long. There are a lot of people with deaf children who start with speech only and years go by before they realise that it is not working. So those years go by and it can be too late. On average, a child should produce their first word or sign by 1. By 18 months, they should know 70 to 80 words or signs. And then by 3, they should know 500 words or signs. If a child is not communicating at 3, then there is a problem. It's possibly either 2 things. 1, they might not have had enough exposure to access the language environment. 2, they could have a neurodevelopmental disorder that impacts them learning language. For both of those possibilities, there needs to be urgency around taking action rather than waiting and hoping for something to happen. No, intervene now.
Definitely.
It's been an interesting discussion.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I hope whoever's watching gains some insight and feels a bit more relieved and reassured, because I definitely felt like some of the information was common sense and obvious. So as long as there is language there as a foundation, that's the main thing. So the children will thrive, I'm sure.
Yes, as long as they have that engagement from their parents,
Yes.
access to education
Yes.
services and more,
Yeah.
they will thrive.
Loads of exposure too.
Yes, alongside with considering how much interaction parents are having with their children.
For my children. Anyways, thank you for your time.
No worries, thank you for having me here. I've enjoyed our conversation.
I hope we have another conversation like this.
Yes.
And whoever sent in the submission, I also hope there was information you could take from this, and that the playgroup benefits from this too, in terms of feeling relieved and more confident moving forwards. And is it okay to have your email in the description box?
Yes, of course, I'm happy with my email to be in the description box.
Great. That can be an opportunity to ask more questions, but also Instagram had increased in content and resources from parents who have been in similar situations. There's bound to be something useful.
And we
yes,
will also
yeah, you
put a
say
link
it.
to the research that Kate mentioned in the description box. You can take a read and maybe
Yes.
a little widen your knowledge around the topic.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, bye.